Good morning. How is everyone? Good. So I'm not sure exactly how much time I have, so I'm just going to start talking. And if people get bored, you can like throw something at me or something. But I'm really excited to be here. I'm from the Bay Area, but I spent, as you'll see in this story I'm about to tell, I spent a lot of time in the past 5 or 6 years in a lot of different parts of the country, but especially in rural North Carolina, which is how I first got connected to Paige and some of the wonderful folks at Glen Raven, and eventually ended up here. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited that you guys all had the experience of being at the D School and also Tech Shop. They're some of our friends and colleagues and collaborators. So a really great group and a great region, the Bay Area, for creativity and innovation. So I'm just going to tell a story because I don't know about you, but I find that my inspiration I draw from talking to people and hearing their stories. And I don't respond so well to like being lectured. So I'm going to try not to lecture and just share the story of what I do, the amazing kids I get to work with, and most importantly, why design and creativity and innovation have been the glue that has held all of our work together, and why I believe it to be this amazing resource for everyone, no matter what you do and where you live and what your skill set is, that there's this level of creativity that we can all continue to push and to never really be satisfied with what we're given. So the story starts in 2008, and I'll come back to this billboard and these 3 words shortly. But I started an organization when I was 26 years old. I'm 32 now. And I started this organization called Project H because I went to school for 6 years and I studying architecture. And I got into architecture, as Cindy alluded to in my introduction, because I grew up having a crush on MacGyver, living in the woods, coming to understand the world as the oldest daughter who my father wanted to be a boy. And I just kind of grew up like looking at all the stuff in his garage and going to open houses with him, and then coming home and like drawing floor plans of my bedroom and rearranging furniture. And that's how I made sense of the world, is like through building and the physical world. So long story short, the 6 years I spent in architecture school did nothing to speak to that desire I had as a kid to learn how to build things and solve problems. As much as I love architecture, architectural education I found to be really disconnected from real problems and real people. So I graduated I got my master's degree in architecture and then worked for about 4 years in pretty traditional like corporate architecture firms, residential. I started making furniture, but it just felt like, so what? Like, so what if I make a chair for Neiman Marcus? Like, what is that? Who cares, you know? So I started Project H really just out of that frustration and having no idea how to do the work that I really wanted to do, but I felt like if I created a nonprofit and it was a legal entity, I would damn sure have to figure it out. And that I would have this thing to answer to where I would have to figure out how to do a project that was meaningful, and then also how to sustain it as a business and make it a financially viable model for design that mattered. So that was 2008, and then in 2009, I got this random email from a superintendent in Bertie County, North Carolina, which, who's from that part of the country? The Carolinas, the South? Has anyone been to Bertie County? I know Paige has. Great, okay, I think that's a record. I've given talks in Raleigh, and I said, who knows where Bertie County is? And like one person raises their hand. So Bertie County is kind of like a magical yet somewhat forgotten place in the northeastern part of North Carolina. I grew to love it, and I lived there for almost 3 years. And but it's definitely a part of the state and of the country that has a lot of challenges. It's extremely rural. It has pretty deeply entrenched racial dynamics, as I'm sure we've all experienced or seen. It's sort of like a case study in the downtowns of America becoming ghost towns, this economic drought that we see in a lot of the main towns there. But anyway, I got connected to Bertie County because of this man, and this is the former superintendent of the Bertie County School District. His name is Dr. Chip Zullinger. We called him Dr. Z. And he sent me this email randomly and was like, hi, my name is Chip Zollinger. I'm the superintendent of this school district, and I would like to invite you and your partner, Matt Miller was my partner at the time, to come down and help me fix this school district using design. And I was like, what the heck kind of superintendent? He had seen work that we had done published on this design blog. And I remember thinking, what kind of superintendent reads design blogs? Like, he gets up in the morning and like goes to treehugger.com or green. I mean, I was like, this is so weird and so awesome. So I had to talk to this guy. And so we just got on the phone, and he's like, I was brought into the school district to fix it by any means necessary. And as far as I know, everything we've done up until this point has gotten us into the situation we're in. So I want to do all the things that we've never done. And that included bringing in 2 designers from San Francisco, really to like do whatever we wanted and try to activate the district again. So just as a context, as I was beginning to describe, as a county and as a school district, Berkeley County does have a lot of challenges. I mean, you see the same type of agricultural landscape, which is both beautiful and also unfortunately creates a very specific economic dynamic between the big scale farms and some of the small scale businesses that have either been shut down or have just kind of been phased out. Windsor is the county seat, and the downtown's pretty much a ghost town. There's not really a whole lot going on. There's not a lot of economic opportunity for the youth. So this is the context in which the school district is sitting and trying to find how they fit into the county economically, socially, et cetera, as an engine rather than just this like side effect of a dying community. So when we first started talking to Dr. Zollinger, he said, I don't know where this is going to go, but I want you to come down here and build these playgrounds. And so this is called the Learning Landscape. This is an educational playground that Project H had designed. Really basic, like dumb construction. This is 25 tires buried halfway in the ground on a 5x5 grid. And we had written about 30 different games that kids could play within this space. So you can build this playground in one day for free if you can find 25 tires and a couple of people willing to dig for a few hours. So luckily, a lot of school districts that have school bus depots have a lot of extra tires. So we built 4 of these playgrounds in 4 days. And we invited all the kids and the teachers to come out. And the game they're playing here is called Match Me. And you can sort of see there's numbers written in chalk on the tires. So in this game, there's 2 teams of kids, and the teacher will say, like, 4 times 3. And then each kid at the beginning of the lines have to figure out that that's 12, right? And then race around and try to find the tire that says 12 on it and sit on it, and then whoever gets there first wins. So they're running around and screaming and laughing and competing and being kids, and then also secretly learning math. So it was a way to bring the classroom outside. So we built these in 4 days, and then we said to Dr. Zollinger, like, that was really great. It was really fun working with you, and is there anything else we can do? And that was the beginning of a very long collaboration. So he gave us, when I said, is there anything else we can do? He said, funny you ask, here's 50 other projects. And we ended up working with him over the course of the next 3 years based on that interaction. So as architects and builders, obviously our response was going to be one of design and building. This was a computer lab space that we redid for the high school, which, because the school district was very low performing, the students were benchmark tested every other week. And where do you take benchmark tests? In really drab computer labs. And so I should have shown a before picture here. So prior to our renovation, this room was unpainted. It was a converted storage unit or storage room. The walls were, CMU concrete block. All the computers are against the wall. The kids come in, they face the wall, they take the test, and they leave. And just like really clinical and not an exciting place for learning or testing. So we did a flip on the space to create more collaborative workstations so that you can work in these pods, and also a rat's nest free space where all of the wires run down through these tree trunk things. So there's no like Ethernet cables hanging from the ceiling or like knots of power cords. It's clean and safe and more interactive and more convivial as a space to be in. This is another computer lab that we built, more optimized for instruction, where the kids are sitting at bar height. We observed, and I see this even now with my current students, that when kids walk into a classroom and they sit down, their instinct is to go like this and fall asleep. And so when you have them seated at a higher level, or standing for that matter, their posture is better, they're more alert, and they're more engaged in what they're learning. So this is a really simple design twist on this space. So we did a couple of these built projects, and as we're going through these projects, we're working with Dr. Zollinger, we're working with teachers, we're getting to know students, we're talking to the mayor, and Bertie County is a pretty small community, and it doesn't take long to know a lot of players in the political arena. So as we're doing these projects, we're starting to understand, and we're not from there, we're outsiders for sure at this point, but we're also seeing things that maybe are not being seen from the inside, and so that's also an asset in some ways. So these 4 things in the center of this diagram: citizenship, creativity, capital, and critical thinking, right? Critical thinking. I'm looking through the palm fronds here. So those are the 4 things that, as we're doing these projects, we're realizing that these are the 4 things that we keep hearing from teachers that the students need in order to be successful as young adults. And we're also hearing these things from the municipal leaders, like these are the things that our community needs in order to survive. So in our heads, as builders and architects, we're thinking, okay, well, those are 4 things that we can deliver, both to the students and to the community, through this curriculum that we started calling Studio H. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with, there's a program out of Auburn University called Rural Studio, and it's an architecture program out of the architecture school. And the premise of Rural Studio is that in order to best learn how to be an architect, you have to go out into a community and design a building and then physically construct it. Because contrary to what you might think, and unfortunately the way I experienced my architectural education, is you design these beautiful buildings and you do these beautiful renderings and you put them up on the wall, and someone comes in and criticizes them and gives you a grade and you go home, and that's it. And I remember my senior year of my architecture program at UC Berkeley, I remember thinking I just poured my heart into this design and I don't get to build any part of it, and that didn't seem like it seemed like an injustice. So our idea for Studio H was that we could create a class for high school students where they would learn how to design and construct a full-scale piece of architecture for their town. And in doing so, they would learn all these things as 17-year-old students, and also in doing so, the community would collectively build this thing that would contribute to the landscape of their town. So that was the pipe dream. We're like, oh, how hard can that be? So we wrote this curriculum, we called it Studio H. This is the first sketch we ever did of what the course map or curriculum would look like. And having gone to the D school, you may have seen some sketches like this, that the design process is always, it's organized chaos, really. And there are often times when it's non-linear, you don't know where you're gonna end up, you start things having no clue where they're gonna go. And that's kind of how we approached our curriculum design too. We knew we wanted to get these students to a place where they were building something meaningful for their community. And how we got there was in one way a mystery, and in one way we felt really confident about it because we knew we had those students to tell us, these are the things that we care about, these are the things we're interested in, and then it was our challenge to figure out how to accommodate that. And that's a weird thing to say in a school district. Most teachers don't want to hear that. They're like, where's the curriculum? Let me teach it from A to Z. And we really felt like we wanted to create a space where the students could say, I want to build this, and then we could say, great, here are 20 tools, let's go build it. So we pitched this to Dr. Zollinger, and of course, being the renegade, awesome man that he was, he said, yeah, of course, go do it. Whatever you need, go teach that class. So we ended up with, this is 2010 to 2011, that school year. We had 13 students. They were all juniors. We had them for half of their school day, and they were, this is my favorite part. So we had them for 3 hours in the morning, and their afternoon classes were all online, including PE. So they had to go from our wood shop, metal shop design studio in the morning to a totally different kind of learning. And that became like a really weird dynamic for them to have to negotiate just academically. But anyway, so we had them for 3 hours a day, every single day for the whole school year. And then over the summer was when we were going to build this big piece of architecture. So we start the school year, and as any good architect would tell you, the best designs grow out of a context. So if you're designing anything, it has to be within the context of the people, place, resources, moment, social and economic needs, et cetera. So this is Bertie County. I could give a whole other lecture on the poultry industry. We know the horrors and the benefits. It's been a point of debate and contention for a long time. And for better or worse, this is one of Bertie County's biggest industries and the source of a lot of my students' families' prosperity. So what we said to our students is like, look, yes, we're from San Francisco. We're not here to criticize the poultry industry, but we do want you to look at something that you've become familiar with and just ask questions like, is this right? Is this wrong? Is it good? Is it bad? What's another way to look at it? There's always another way to look at something. It might be better, it might be worse, but let's just start asking those questions. So what we asked our students is, instead of having 250,000 chickens on your family's property, which one of our students did, what might it look like to have just a couple egg-laying hens in your backyard as a source of sustainable food? So we're still housing chickens, we're still using them for food, but just what's another way to look at it? So we challenged them to design a chicken coop, and the first thing we did was borrow these two chickens, Henrietta and Jezebel, from our friend who lived down the road, and they became our classmates, and we just kind of like sat there and observed them for what felt like forever. We built this little makeshift coop for them, and you have to understand your client if you're going to design something for them. So we sat there and we watched them, and I learned way more about chicken behavior than I ever wanted to. But so when we built the chicken coop, we built this little trough for their food, and then in observing them, realized they don't want to eat out of a trough. They want to peck it out of the ground. They want to just like walk around and peck their food and chill out, and then huddle up and lay their eggs. And all of those things have spatial implications. So when the students went to design their chicken coop, they're thinking about the behavior of chickens and how that translates into space. So I'll just show really quickly my favorite chicken coop that was built. And this is I should also say, this is the first time a lot of these students have ever been asked to make or build anything, ever. Not just at school, like also in their lives. And part of my role, I think, both as an educator and as a designer, is to show my students that whatever you thought to be possible, we can take it to like 50 other different places, and there's this whole realm of possibility that design allows you to unlock. So on the first day, I said, someone come and draw me a chicken coop. And I get a box with a A-frame roof. I'm like, okay, great. Now you can't draw a box and you can't draw an A-frame roof. Now what does it look like? And they all go, I have no idea. And so that's where the learning starts. And I asked each student to make 50 models, and they looked at me like I was crazy, because this is also a generation and a school district that is used to reading something from a textbook, memorizing it, taking a test, getting a grade, and then never having to think about it again. So to ask a 17-year-old to make 50 models of something is like, I mean, you should have seen, I wish I had photos of the looks on their faces. They were like, that's not going to happen, and you're crazy. But that process of iteration, which I'm sure you heard that word a lot yesterday at the D school, that the process of iteration just is a sheer numbers game. If you have to do something 50 times, the 50th is going to be way more creative than the first. That's just true. So these are some of the models that they built, just a couple of them. This is like probably 1/20th of the models that they built. And as you can kind of tell, like, those don't look like normal chicken coops. And I kept pushing them to give me something crazier. So this particular chicken coop, this is inspired by Buckminster Fuller and the geodesic dome and the Demaxian house. So I'm sure you've all seen geodesic domes, but Bucky Fuller's thing, was that you could take really simple geometry, whether it was an almost equilateral triangle or a hexagon or some simple piece of geometry, and then in aggregation and in this like mathematical interpretation of it, you could create really beautiful and structurally strong structures, and that are to this day like viewed as really innovative and beautiful. So our student was assigned Buckminster Fuller as his initial research project, and his models started to reflect some of that inspiration. So we did all these models they all started as flat pieces of cardboard, and then he just like cut and scored them in various geometries and wanted to figure out how he could make that three-dimensional. So this is like 6 of 50 models that he built. And then he brought this to us and he said, okay, I'm ready. This is what I want to build. This is the coop I want to construct. And I remember looking at Matt, my partner, and I was like, that is the coolest thing. I'm so excited that he figured that out, and I have no idea how to build it. Like, not even a little clue. I understand how that works in chipboard. That's one piece of chipboard that has been creased and folded, and I get that in chipboard. But in real life, I don't know how to do that in wood, and I don't know how to create something that is both flexible and sturdy at the same time out of wood and sheet metal. So I remember thinking, okay, do I tell my student Eric that I don't know what I'm doing right now? Or do I pretend like I do, like most teachers do, like we're the expert of everything? So I told him, I'm like, Eric, I have no idea how to build this, but I promise you right now that we're gonna figure it out. And so I think also just part of creativity is like being in that kind of egalitarian space and communicating vulnerability. Like, I don't know how to do that, but we're definitely gonna figure it out. So we did like, oh my God, what felt like 20 different rounds of prototyping, trying to figure out how to hinge this thing, but then also hinge it such that when it was in place, it was sturdy. And so we did this is like the Oreo cookie sheet metal plywood scenario that we came up with, that's on this isosceles triangle geometry with like varying rotations of the triangles and minimizing waste based on how we cut it on the table saw. So this is like a lot of really advanced visual mathematical thinking for an 11th grader. So we're also teaching core subjects. So we figure it out and we lay this thing flat. This is mimicking the piece of cardboard that he originally modeled it in. And then we had a raise the roof day, and all of the kids had to come and pick this thing up, and we're looking across the room at the model and trying to figure out, like in full scale with this thing over our heads, how do you get it to look like the model? So we're like pushing and pulling and bracing stuff to the wall and trying not to, making sure we're all safe at the same time. So eventually it starts to look like the model, and we had just done a MIG welding unit. So one of the requirements was they had to have a structural steel component. So this is with the frame in place. And then they used just a really simple rubberized roof paint to weatherize it. And then this is the final coop, which they named Coopus Maximus in honor of Bucky Fuller, and then the team that built it. And so again, like, this is not a traditional chicken coop. For most of these, actually for all of these 4 kids, Eric, Alexia, Karan, and Cameron, this is the first thing that any of them had built, like with any kind of intention in their entire lives. And I say that with a great deal of pride that I was able to show them, and they were able to show themselves, that whatever they thought to be true, they could go so far beyond it and exceed their own expectations. So this is the first project that we did, and remembering though that we promised the community and our students that we would build not chicken architecture, but people architecture. So we now have to go from chickens to people and start to look again at the context and ask, what does our community need? So as we're starting to ask these questions with a little bit of wind under our wings, this flood comes through downtown Windsor and destroys the whole town. And this, unfortunately, was the second flood in 15 years that destroyed Windsor. So kind of a weird moment to have 17-year-olds knocking on the mayor's door saying, what can we do to make our town better? And so it became this really wonderful, tragic, but also beautiful moment in citizenship, a lesson in citizenship, where our students had to negotiate how to bring both empathy and ambition to this conversation of rebuilding. So FEMA is there. There's like all kinds of mold remediation going on, and in the midst of all of this, my students are trying to figure out what can we do not just to rebuild our town, but to build back better. So what they came up with, and this came from conversations with the mayor, the county commissioners, being in like Rotary Club meetings, interviewing their grandparents, going into all the other classes at a bunch of other grade levels. And what they decided was that they wanted to build a farmer's market, which in theory is not a revolutionary idea. There's farmer's markets everywhere. But for Bertie County, it was. The closest farmer's market before this one was built was 80 miles away. You have 39% obesity. You have a county-wide public health budget of $100,000 for the entire county. One grocery store, which half the time doesn't have produce, and if they do, it's like 500% overpriced. So it made sense economically and health-wise. It also made sense for the small-scale farmers who maybe don't have 250,000 chickens, but they do have a commodity, and what they don't have is the opportunity to sell. So it made sense on a lot of levels. And so the mayor, God bless him, said, that's brilliant. Like, we tried to have a farmer's market 5 years ago. It totally flopped. We would love to find a way to make it more sustainable, to actually keep it alive. So he gave us this plot of land, which doesn't look like a whole lot, but from the red truck to the fence, that was our site. It was about 40 by 60 feet. And he said, whatever you want to build, you have carte blanche, just you build it. And I'll be a part of the design process, but I want it to be yours and your students. So we said, great. And I'm pretty sure I'm never going to get another offer from a mayor like that. So this was our site. And just like the chicken coops, we went back into the design studio, and it was the same thing, like, give me 100 models this time. So we looked at precedent studies. We visited the state farmers market. We did all the sort of like site analysis and research to understand the context. And each student came up with a really audacious plan, and we presented those plans to the public. So this is one of my favorite pictures. This is my student Karan on the left, and one of the town councilmen, Jock, on the right. And these are two people who I would pretty much like stake my reputation on the fact that these two never would have met ever in Bertie County, let alone being in a room talking about this thing that they both like so deeply wanted to make happen. And that Karan is explaining this idea that he came up with, and Jock is listening with such focus, like, yeah, that's a great idea. And this was like a 10-minute conversation. So building aside, like artifact aside, this is what creativity and design can foster, is putting people in a room that maybe don't even belong in the room together, but they're in the room together and they're talking about something they care about. So we do this public exhibition, we take a ton of really great feedback, and now we actually have to build the thing. Like, this is where most architectural education stops. Like, okay, we've shown our work, we've gotten feedback, I got a C+ and I'm done. We actually have to build this. And so we go through a lot of rounds of structural review. We have $60,000, 4 months to build it. We're in a hurricane zone where we have to engineer this thing to 110-mile-an-hour sustained winds. We're in a flood zone where we have to build the deck of the building at 3 feet above base flood elevation level. So these are like real building constraints. And we are also a general contractor, so we're able to do the work ourselves. But as you might guess, North Carolina labor law is not so fond of having 16-year-olds on a construction site. So we also found out that we could not have anyone under the age of 18 on the construction site operating a power tool. So that makes it kind of hard. So these are all the constraints that we're up against. And we have these things in the back of our head, like, okay, like that means we have to do this, that means we have to do this. We have a public review with our engineers to figure out like which of these designs. We have 13 designs, and we have to pick one or some combination of a couple that we can build within all those constraints. So what we come up with is this very simple structure inspired by some of the local farm architecture that's in Bertie County. There's these really beautiful sheds that have eight bays that they pull peanut trailers into. And it's this very specific archetype. There's 8 bays, and it has this beautiful kind of butterfly roof. So we took that as an inspiration, and we called this design vernacular sublime. So it's familiar, but with a twist. So this is the same thing, 8 bays, but instead of peanut trailers, there'd be 1 bay for each vendor. And this double height ceiling that would allow greater ventilation, and then also we can use that front facade as a billboard. It's essentially a front porch, like a big front porch to the town. So we have this model, and school gets out on like June 10th or whatever day, and everyone's like so excited for summer, and the school year's over, and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? We have a 2,000 square foot building to construct. Like, let's do that for the summer. So we all show up on the site for the first day, and as I mentioned, we can't use power tools. So these are the trusses for the building that we had to prefabricate in the shop where we had the access and ability to use chop saws and table saws, et cetera. Disassemble them, bring them to the site, reassemble them using like mallets and socket wrenches, and then raise them into the air with this gigantic machine that we borrowed from a friend, which I had to learn how to use in 10 minutes. It was so much fun. But this is where, like, imagine being a 17-year-old, and 2 weeks prior to this, you're like finalizing a model in cardboard, and then 2 weeks after that, you're on this site watching that model like physically come to life. So for me, I was like trying to hold back tears the entire construction process because I'm really proud of our students and I'm watching how they're experiencing this process. The other thing I should mention is that we didn't just build the farmer's market, we had to start a farmer's market like as an enterprise. We had to recruit farmers, set up the organization within the city, figure out who was gonna manage it, come up with the entire business structure. So as this building was being constructed, the farmer's market had started in a temporary location in a parking lot, like just to the left of the construction site. So every Saturday there are people starting to come to this farmer's market and walking past this site every weekend and passively getting to be a part of it. So there was this element of theater to it, like you're walking by it and every week you can expect it to be getting closer to the opening weekend. And you're seeing 16-year-old kids who are male, female, black, white, all working together to build this thing. So over the course of the summer, we followed our construction schedule, and you can kind of see here, so this is putting the floor joists in, and that deck height is 3 feet above base flood elevation level, which means you have to ramp up to it. There's all kinds of additional ADA requirements. But one of our students, in his brilliance, said, oh, well, that's also the height of a truck bed. So let's just use the back end of the building as the loading dock for the vendors to just pull up, drop their truck beds, load into their booths, and done. And I was like, that is brilliant. And then on opening day, when he saw that happening, he's like, oh, I made that decision. That was a deliberate design decision, and it worked. So this is putting the floor joists in, and then I took this photo 2 days before Hurricane Irene came through. So we hear there's a hurricane coming and we're like, oh my God, this town cannot catch a break. Like first there was also an F4 tornado, which I didn't show photos of, but this is like, it's just crazy, and our students are having to negotiate all these things, both personally in their lives and in their town, and then also as people trying to build something that will withstand all of these forces. So this is the day before it came through, and luckily all was fine. And then putting up the siding, and then this is the final structure. So this opened at the end of the summer, and after a long summer of building, it was the perfect finale to have this opening ceremony with the mayor, with all of the vendors. This was the first day that all of the vendors who had been in this temporary location moved into the space and got to use the space, which they had been witnessing, rise up out of the ground. So it was a really special thing for our students also to see their decisions that they had made while sitting at their desk with an X-Acto blade and cardboard being used at full scale exactly as they had intended. So these are some of the students on opening day, and my student Karan, who's standing there, he's wearing the striped shirt in the front. So the mayor gave this little talk, and he gave our students the key to the city, which was so cute. And Karan kind of like took the microphone from him unexpectedly and gave this really impassioned speech. And he said, I'd been trying to make sense of this project all along the way and like try to understand what we had done, what we were doing, and how we could keep doing it again and keep teaching in a way that was meaningful. And he said it perfectly. He's like, I'm 17 years old. At the beginning of this project, I thought that these two teachers were crazy because we're 17 and who are we to build a farmer's market? But now I'm standing in it, and I want to come back in 10 or 20 years with my kids and tell them that I built this. And I remember thinking like, that's the thesis right there. That it was about education and it was about design, but it was also about this kid feeling like he finally had a voice in his town and that he had contributed something to it, that he had a reason to come back, and that he had a voice in this place where up until that point he had really been voiceless. So this is at the end of 2011. And then just really quickly, following this first year of teaching, we had another class of students in Bertie, and we gave them the same challenge, like, what do you want to build? Let's look around, let's ask, what does our community need, and how can we deliver that? And what they said was really kind of magical. They said, the farmers market was a huge success. We could build something brand new. We could build a historical society. We could build a new dog pound, but why? We want to contribute to the thing that's already in motion. So they built these two really, really cool little 100-square-foot farm stands that are sort of scattered around the county because the county is so big and it takes like an hour and a half to drive across the whole county, maybe even more. So they wanted the entire county to feel like they could access the farmers market as a network rather than just this one hub in Windsor. So this is one, and then this is the other one, which I always forget. So we did Battle of the Sexes for this. So this was the one designed by the boys. It's very curvaceous. And then the previous one was the one designed by the girls, which is like all boxy and rational. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. So this was 2 years in Bertie County and really like the birth of Studio H as a program and as an idea and as a model for what creativity can look like within a school. So the second chapter to the story is that we left Bertie County for a whole host of reasons, mostly political, some financial, but we also just felt like, okay, we've done this for 2 years, and we really want to be in a place and in a school where we can push the boundaries on what Studio H could be. So if we have 13 kids in a barn and that's what we can do, what could we do with like 200 kids in a new school in an urban setting? So like, what are the two polar opposites? And you may have heard at the D school, I'm sure someone talked about designing for the extremes. Like if you design at both ends of a spectrum, it'll probably work anywhere in between. So we moved our program to Realm Charter School, which he's going to get mad at me for pointing him out, but Victor Diaz is sitting back there. He's the founder and director of Realm, and he'll be leading some of the breakout sessions. But we came to Realm really for a lot of the same reasons and more that we went to Bertie County in the first place, and it was because of a kindred spirit and because we saw the vision of a school that was so much aligned with what we believed Studio H was. So Realm is in its third year now. It's in Berkeley. It's a pretty amazing place. There's like magic in the walls. There's amazing kids, and founded on the idea that design and creativity and project-based learning is a way to engage kids that traditional instruction just doesn't. It's a really great group of teachers, and so it was just a natural fit for us to move there. So last year, this is our second year at Realm. Last year, we had only high school students, and then this year we added an 8th grade program, which 8th graders are interesting and not the same as high school students. So, but this is sort of the challenge that we've given to our students at Realm, that our school's growing, we don't have a blank, so we're gonna build it ourselves. And that's kind of been the spirit in which our students have come into our class and worked throughout the semesters. So I'll just show really quickly some of the projects we've done here. And Berkeley's like 45 minutes away, so these are all sort of local projects. So last year, our 10th grade students said, we're in this district building. We have a lot of things that we need, but we're short one classroom. We want one more space to learn, to be indoors/outdoors as an instructional space, but also just like a hangout space or some kind of flex space that we as students feel some sort of ownership over. So we got these 3 shipping containers, and just in the same way that the farmers market taught carpentry and welding and all this array of tools, these shipping containers sort of allowed us the same freedom, that they're big metal boxes. We can cut them up. We can change them and move them and orient them in different ways. And so the challenge that we gave the students is, here's 3 shipping containers. create a space that is enclosed for a classroom and also has some sort of outdoor flexibility. So they learned basic carpentry and certainly a lot of metal work. Space planning, they decided to orient them in this particular way so that there was a classroom and a courtyard. And then this is at about 85% done. We added this sort of raised roof component to frame out the classroom space. And then also last year, we have a laser cutter, and it's so awesome and fun to use. And so we wanted to also say to the students, look, this is about need, but it's also about fun. Like, what are the things that you enjoy? And like, if you could build anything, like, what would you want to build? And a lot of them are really great, and they're excited about skateboarding. So they said, well, it would be really cool to make skateboards. I was like, great, I have no idea how to do that. Let's figure it out. And I can't skateboard to save my life either. I'm like, I have no interest or desire to learn. It's just like not my thing. But it is for a lot of our students. So we learned how to make skateboards. It's 7 layers of maple plywood pressed in this like 20,000 pound press, and then laser etched. So like the lowest tech to the highest tech, and both of those things are equally as important. And also trying to tie in some of the core subjects. This was a lesson in geometry and replication and drawing something to scale and then putting it in Adobe Illustrator. And again, the low and high tech are just as important. And then this year, so as I said, we added this 8th grade class, mostly because our high school students are so awesome, and because Realm is a middle school and a high school, we had a lot of middle school students and families saying, well, hello, can we do something like this at the lower grade levels? And of course we wanted to do that. So we have an additional 8th grade teacher now, and the thing that the middle school as a facility has been lacking up until this point is a school library. And so the students said, okay, well, we don't have a library, let's build it ourselves. And it's that same kind of like, let's just do it spirit that we try to breed within the program. So the design for the library, the space already exists. And so the challenge for the students was to create a building system and a building unit that we could replicate and turn into something really beautiful in a lot of different aggregations. So there's this really simple X unit. It's an X-shaped, it's 2 pieces of wood that kind of like slat together. One of them has a concave face and the other one has a convex face. And they lock together and create all kinds of stuff. This is a shelving unit. This is actually in the library space. And then everything else, tables, desks, chairs. The beauty of the building unit, which is sort of a metaphor for our class of 8th graders, is that individually they're really beautiful and well designed, but in aggregation they're so much more than they are as the sum of their parts. So that was the challenge for them, to create as many amazing things out of the same unit as they could. So I have a quick little video I'm going to show, which there is also this element to entrepreneurship to this project, that we're going to build a library ourselves. That means we're also going to raise all the money for it ourselves. So this is a video, if we can switch over to that. Oh. Realm is a charter school in Berkeley, California. It's 3 years old, and we have 600 students. Realm is the place where teachers and students have the audacity to design and build the environments that they imagine, and Studio H is the place where they get to do that.
We don't have a library yet, so we're just gonna make it ourselves.
We definitely have a lot here, but our teacher, Miss Nini, asked us what else we want from our school, and everybody had some crazy ideas.
One of the students said they wanted to find their inner selves. Another student said that they wanted to understand how microphones work. Overwhelmingly, they all wanted a place to read, relax, focus, learn, and explore. Studio H is a place where students actually get to see some of their ideas come to fruition.
Well, like I said, we need a library, so we started there.
It's important that they start to be able to feel like they can control their environment, they can shape their environment, and that they can leave something in the environment that will be of benefit to future kids.
Even though we're super good, we can't do this ourselves. We need your help.
We already did the hard work for you, though. We designed the whole thing. Everything you need for a good library. The book stamps, the bookmarks, the book bags, but the coolest are these shelves.
We're calling them stacks, well, because they stack. And they're shaped like an X.
We can make one stacks to hold a few books or put many stacks together to make huge shelves for tons of books. And we can even use them for stools and desks and benches and who knows what else. All of these things together will make an entire X space. X can be anything and we can learn anything here. What's even cooler is that we designed this thing that not only solves something for us, but can be good for other people too.
I think it's real empowering for kids to figure out that, everything in the world around them is designed and that they can have a design of their own.
It goes beyond our school walls. When we get one, you get one too. All you have to do is pledge.
We're only 13 years old, but we're gonna build a library that we can leave behind for other kids like us. At Bellman Studio H, we are building our own world, and at Kickstart, you can build it with us.
Being able to put power tools in the hands of 13-year-olds and give them a green light is a complete dream job.
Yeah, so part of this project was also saying to the kids, like, let's understand how stuff gets built and what it costs, and then let's just go make it happen. So the campaign just closed last week. We raised $78,000 in 30 days, and the building, the library space will be built out by June, and then all the books and everything will be in it for a grand opening in September. So these are 8th graders, and this is the first time we've ever worked with 8th graders, and for Studio H as a program, it's a great thing to witness that kids really of any age are capable and have this like brilliance in them that oftentimes we as adults are the ones holding it back. So I'll just close with my sort of one of the latest initiatives that we've been working on, which is very close to my heart. As I kind of talked about in the very beginning, I grew up like playing in the woods and as kind of like a misfit of a kid, and so a lot of the work that I'm doing now with Camp H with these younger girls, which I'll show in just a minute, really comes from starting to think about the things that as a kid helped me make sense of the world and how I might be able to provide that and curate a space for that for girls now. So this is a quote from one of our campers. I'm a 10-year-old girl and I know how to weld. What can't I do? So Camp H was a program that grew out of some of the observations I had within Studio H and how my female students were experiencing design and building very differently than some of the male students. And not like in a better or worse way, just differently. There was a different approach. And I was very aware of some of the gender dynamics on the construction site, for example. So Camp H is for 9 to 12-year-old girls. It's really like a adorable and wonderful, like happy place. And these little girls get to walk in and use a chop saw that's bigger than they are, and they get to say, I want to make a house for my cat, and they get to build it in like 90 minutes. So it's really fun for me, and it's sort of an experiment, but it's also like therapy in a way. Like I love working with these girls and seeing what they're capable of, and there is so much exploration and understanding to be done around how we're providing these opportunities, not only to all kids, but to particular groups of kids that maybe have a different need or a different way that they approach this type of work. So this is a geodesic dome that they built in 42 minutes, 9-year-old girls, learning how to check oil levels and maintain a car. And then all of them also learned how to weld and constructed these really cool steel symbols that were inspired by the meaning of their name. And a lot of this stuff that you're seeing here is in this gallery space just right next door, and you'll see some of it during our breakout sessions. So I'll end with this first slide and these 3 words, which I said I would come back to. And I think this has been 6 years of my life, and the work and the learning and the practice for me personally, and I think also for my students, has really centered around these 3 words. And every decision we've made along the way, whether it was to go to Bertie County or leave Bertie County or teach an 8th grade class or work with 10-year-old girls, it all really comes back to these 3 words, that that design for me is not this like elusive thing that's fancy lamps for rich people. Design is creative problem solving. And the same way that the D School talks about design as a process, as a systemized process for creativity, we talk about design in that way too, that it is creativity. It's always looking for what's another way we could look at it, what's another way we could talk about it, what's the next phase of ongoing improvement, and always believing that things can be better. And then build is just about like having the chutzpah to go out and do those things. Like people have so many great ideas, but how many of those ideas actually get put through the ringer and like made real? I would actually love to know like what the statistic is on that. I think it's probably very low. So the build portion is really like, okay, we have all these great things, now let's go and make them happen, like by any means necessary. And transform that all these things that we dream up and eventually build have to be within some kind of social context where they're benefiting someone or something, that they're not just a fancy lamp, that we're doing things that have purpose and that benefit the lives of others and that are meaningful to us too. I mean, I'm the first person to say that Camp H is a very selfish endeavor for me because I love it. I love it and I find a lot of joy in it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So the creativity, the execution, and then making meaning of what we're doing in a greater context, and that all three of those things we can all do, whether you're in a classroom or in an architecture firm or working in any corporate capacity. These are all things that we can live every day. So thank you very much.